Good evening and welcome. Good evening or good morning, I should say, maybe for Julia that welcomes us. Welcome to the Little Photo Factory, a platform dedicated to the in-depth exploration of street photography and its photographers, its artisans. I am Gennaro, your host, and it's my privilege to welcome today a distinguished guest. Julia Coddington. Julia stands as a prominent figure in the realm of street photography. She's celebrated for insightful, compelling visual storytelling. And I should say that she's also a founder of a collective, an exposed collective. And she has been highlighting the work of women photographers, non-binary street photographers, and fostering diversity and new perspective within the field, which will be a field of interest for me today. How did you start photography? How did you come to photography?
Thanks, Gennaro, and thank you very much for inviting me. And greetings from Australia, where it's a sunny morning. So I've been focused on street photography probably since about 2012, even though I've been photographing since I was about 7 or 8 years old, but just like most people. But I really started getting sort of obsessed with it around 2015 and just increasingly traveling more extensively now that I'm able to, although that's going to be curtailed a little bit this year because I have a grandchild arriving. So
Congratulations.
Thank you. When I first started, it was sort of more travel photography. So back in, this is really aging me now, 1984, when I lived in Indonesia, I traveled quite a lot around Asia. I photographed quite a lot then with an analog camera, obviously. But it was more what you would now call travel photography, even though I was sort of more focused on photographing people. So I've always had a fascination with people and the way people react and behave. And then 2008, I got my first iPhone, and with my partner, Jerry Orkin, we sort of started playing around with taking photos with the iPhone, candid street photos. And then we started traveling around 2012 because we were able to do it from that point, and sort of developed from there, really.
Is there a peculiar event so that you delve into street photography specifically?
Not specifically, although I did see an Elliot Erwitt exhibition in Vienna in 2012, and that really kind of spurred me on. It was sort of the realization at that point in time that, oh yes, there's this genre of photography called street photography. And so I started really exploring it at that point.
While preparing this interview, I was very interested in your pictures on how we feel so close to the people. And I encountered an article about Julia Friedman, and she said something that resonated a lot with your pictures. And she said, I put a lot of time into being invisible. It can feel with your pictures that you're invisible. How do you become invisible, and how do you get so close to people?
Well, I have an advantage because I'm fairly small and older, and people don't see, particularly older women, they don't see you. So it's a huge advantage, and I always tell other women that is an advantage that they should use. I discovered this probably around 2015, 16, and became more aware of it, and noticed that people just didn't notice me taking photos. They weren't, I didn't seem to be much of a threat. And I started to get closer and closer, and it's almost like a game to see how close I can actually get without people seeing me. I sort of am attracted to groups of people or people doing things where they're distracted. So I can go in very, very close to them because they don't, not a big person. I can go in really close, blend in, and get right up close to them. And the other thing that I always tell my students is that you never look at the person that you're photographing. If you want a candid photo, don't ever look at the person that you're photographing. You look beyond or pretend that you're looking at something else. So, there are a couple of techniques and a couple of advantages that I have. That I'm small, I'm an older person, I'm not a threat. I look for things look for people who are distracted, and I don't look at them.
And I guess at some point it was a kind of pictures that you enjoyed. I mean, I definitely enjoy seeing them, but I guess also making them must be very some sort of excitement to get so close and to.
Yeah, it's excitement, but there's also this kind of, I really want to capture the intimacy of getting close. I like being close to people. I'm an affectionate person, and closeness is a thing that I enjoy. And getting close to people who aren't even really aware that I'm there is, yes, it's a thrill, but it's also this thing that I'm kind of really wanting to capture. We are, as human beings, intimate people, and getting into people's personal space, especially, in India, it's easy to do that. But here, particularly in Western cultures, people like to have their own personal space. So trying to get into that personal space to create that intimate moment is something that I try and achieve in my photos, and I'm trying to do that more and more, actually.
Do you have a lot of interaction after the pictures, or it doesn't happen much?
No, I don't. Especially if I'm photographing here in Australia, no, I don't. In India, it's a completely different situation. So you have to get them while they're distracted, take their photos before they see you, right? Yes. Because as soon as they see you, they start posing. So I capture the moments before they see me, but then I'll interact with them and take their photos and do their selfies. But the other thing, if there's a scene developing, if they're doing something, then I'll just stay with them long enough so that they get used to me being there. So then I disappear, and then I start photographing them again. And you can do that there. Whereas here, if you do that, you sort of look a bit creepy. But yeah, it's much easier to do.
I guess you can also. I mean, that's one of the techniques I teach, is that start with interaction. If you're too afraid, start with interaction and then provoke something natural while you're discussing or interacting. It's also something that can work. So I guess
there's a technique that I use so I photograph a lot at the local swimming pool. People know me there, so they will often come up and chat with me. So sometimes I'll use that, when they're chatting with me, I will take photos at the same time. For example, if their hands are moving around, I'll use those hands as a foreground element while watching for things happening behind. So that's another technique that I use.
Am I misplacing this? I'm so sorry if I don't recall if you had a book about it. I believe you had a book about this.
So I did. I had a little zine, a bump book zine, but I've been thinking about a book for a long time. The main issue with producing a book, of course, as you will know, is very expensive. But this is kind of the year that I think I'll try and start putting something together and start thinking seriously about trying to get some sort of funding for it. I'm not sure.
Most of the publishers, at least in France, that I know, installed publisher will make photographers go through Kickstarter or those kind of financing. Yeah. Even if the book is financed, they will do that either way. So it's just I feel like it's now common ground for everybody, published or not. It's just
Yes.
you have to go through this. So it's just
Yeah. And there are
anyway.
so many books, and so many people are producing books.
Right.
But so many people ask me, when are you going to produce?
Oh yeah, no, I believe with this project. I mean, it feels like you certainly have the material for a compelling book. I mean, this is
I do have a
very
lot
obvious.
of material. And each year I think, oh, just a little bit more. I just want to get a little bit more, you know.
My next question would be about the Unexposed Collective.
Okay.
Can you tell us a bit more about it, what it is, and what
Okay.
is
I'm wearing a
is
t-shirt today.
purpose? Wonderful.
It's back to front. So the Unexposed Collective was started back at the beginning of 2018. So it'll be 6 years this month. And it was founded by my friend Rebecca Wiltshire and I. And initially it was just Australian focused. So we wanted to form a group that was sort of focused on Australian female and non-binary and intersex photographers. So we started that, and it was great because it got mostly women together to photograph, and there are, you know, very close-knit groups now, particularly in Perth and Melbourne, that have arisen out of Unexposed. Then, was it 2020, we decided to open it up to international people because there was, you know, people wanted to join us, and we kept saying, no, we're just Australian. But during the pandemic, people couldn't get out to photograph as much. So we decided that, yes, we would open it up, and just as a way to kind of reinvigorate it. So we're quite active still, and we sort of work in collaboration with Women in Street. Do you know Women in Street?
Yes,
So
I have
that's a
encountered,
large
yes.
international community of women. I work with Casey Meshbesher, she's the founder, and I work with her in that group as well. And there are a lot of other groups that are country specific or regional specific based Women in Street groups. So there's one in Singapore, there's one in Turkey, one in Bulgaria, one in Japan, Taiwan, and yeah, I think that's it.
If someone is listening to this in France, for instance, I have lots of my viewership is in France, who is listening to this and would want to, I don't know, create Women in Street in France, they can contact you. I'll leave the details in the description.
Yes, definitely.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Wonderful. Then, if you're listening to this and if you're interested, do that, please. Julia, I don't know how to say what I'm about to say, and I'm interested in subjects. I mean, if it's uncomfortable and if you don't want to go in this territory, just tell me. It's just I'm interested in the fact that my YouTube channel is about street photography mainly. I mean, mostly.
Yeah.
And it has 90% men viewership.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm probably the first responsible for that, because I do not interview enough women, and I mean, it's a fact, and I'm trying to work on this. But it cannot be the only reason. And I believe that, I mean, I'm sorry if it's too long, but I'm also a bit proud that about 50% of my students in my workshops or trainings that I do online are women. Mm-hmm. And so there's stronger diversity in my main trainings. But still, I feel and I hear a lot that, and I mean, I believe it's a fact that streets are more dangerous for women. You get a different experience in life in the streets as a woman than as a white male of 47, which I am, you know, and everything that can seem easy for me, I know that it can be very different, and that some women can have a lot of difficulties to just go out in the street and do whatever they want and practice their art. Sorry for the long question.
No,
Is that
okay.
something that resonates?
Yeah, I mean, I think most people who are interviewed on podcasts are men. And I think, the groups that are formed, street photography groups that are formed, are focused on men. And there are, groups of men who become friends, and that's just how things develop. There are a lot of women who photograph out there, and a lot of women do my workshops as well. I don't know about the issue of it being dangerous on the street to photograph, because you see a lot of women photographing on the street. I think there are particular areas that women can't go that men can. I think it's easier for men to photograph at night, for example. Women will have to go with other people to feel comfortable. In India, I don't have an issue photographing on the street, although, again, you attract more attention as a woman, and more men sort of come and they want to have their photo taken with you. So you really have to be really firm with them. I photographed in Egypt this time. I went to Cairo for the first time. Cairo was great to photograph, beautiful light, and people were very friendly. I went, however, if you're a woman, you do attract more male attention, even at my age. I mean, seriously. We went to a busy pet market, which was fantastic, just awesome. It was really crowded and busy, but I was physically groped in the market 3 times by the same person, and I had to turn around and physically hit the person and scream at them to go away. So, and if that happened here, that person would be up for sexual assault. Whereas it's just much more normal for that sort of thing to happen. Women just are much lower down, there's not as much respect. So yes, it can be dangerous on the streets for women in particular locations. Here, however, I think it's a little bit different. It's much easier for women to photograph here. In terms of female presence online and being interviewed for podcasts and running workshops and that sort of thing, I think there are so many women with, they're fantastic photographers. And the work that we see online now by women is just outstanding, and it's getting better and better. And yes, they take workshops. They're fantastic photographers, but they just, with some people, they have the confidence to get out and promote themselves. But it's much, much harder for women to promote themselves, because first of all, they don't have the confidence. Secondly, they're often criticized for promoting themselves. They're often, it's not just by men, but also by other women. If you promote yourself, it's completely different. So if men promote themselves, it's okay. But if women promote themselves, it's kind of looked down upon. It's as if you shouldn't be doing it. It's very strange. So I think that has huge implications for female photographers and the profile of female photographers.
If you want to get into different steps of photography, if you want to evolve in photography, at some point, especially now, I feel it's needed to be like, oh, I exist. This is what I do. At least show it. And yes, I it's true. I see way less women doing the actual work of promoting themselves, and I didn't realize that anyone who has a platform, even small, to just and we should definitely be more attentive to this, and I of course include myself in this. I was reading, preparing this interview, that it was talking about writers. I was about to say back in the days, but it's probably still an ongoing problem, that you still need some time to write or to get out in the street and do some pictures. And if the woman doesn't have and has a role in the house, in the family, that is on her, and there's no other equation than this, just to find the time to be alone and to write, or to be alone and go shoot some pictures. So that's the first step, is that I don't have the time to do it.
Yes, that's correct.
And I don't have the permission to have the role to do it. And the second part of it relates in this article that I read, that you just talked about, is that it's not only is it hard to promote yourself because there are always gatekeepers who are men, but on top of that, if you're doing any art as a woman, you will be seen as an artist / woman before being an artist.
Correct.
Which is insane. Which is insane.
I know.
And so
particularly
I don't have a question.
2024. But I think, that issue of women not having the time, I was only able to start seriously photographing after my kids were old enough. I have 3 adult kids now. You see the photographers that are out there, the female photographers, are similar to me. They've had kids and now they have free time, so they're older. So that's a disadvantage as well, because we're older. We're not as cool, we're not as interesting as younger women. So there are a couple of different types of female photographers. There are the younger women who haven't yet had kids. Then there are the women with young kids who still make time to photograph, but it's a struggle for them. And then there are older women and more older women out photographing, but it's hard for them too, because they're not as accepted as being young and cool and interesting.
And I was quoting Jill Friedman just before, and Jill Friedman never had kids.
Yeah.
She started 25 years at the age of 25, but she never had kids. I don't believe that photography has had a Me Too moment.
In terms of photography having a Me Too moment, I mean, I only know in relation to street photography, and that, I guess, we're having our Me Too moment now with all the female street photography groups that are popping up. There's been this exponential increase in the number of women photographers as a result of these groups. So you've got Women in Street, you've got Unexposed, you've got women street photographers. Gulnara, she works really hard to expose female street photographers. So in that sense, yes, we kind of are. And I'm doing interviews, I'm running workshops. There aren't many women running street photography workshops. So there will be more. There will be more women. So in that sense, I hope that this is kind of the start of the female street photography Me Too moment.
Yes, wonderful. And we don't have to have publicized awful stories to get the evolution of street photography that is
I'm
needed.
Sure they exist. I haven't heard of any specifically, but they exist everywhere.
If you're listening to this, every single collective or community that was cited by Julia is in the description. please go check their work, go subscribe to them, send message. I am sure you will be well received. And if you have nothing in France, maybe it's the calling so that you can start it. So I'm really thankful, Julia, for accepting this and for talking about all this. I mean, it's really the least I can do. Thank you so much for your photography that is very joyful and intense, and this intimacy that I don't recall seeing anything like this anywhere. So it's really, really, really interesting. And thank you for all this.
Thank you, Gennaro.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure.